My name is Sasha, and that's John Granzo. I'm going to talk for 12 minutes, and I set my little alarm. And then I'm going to give an overview of the center where I work and John studies. It's the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics at Stanford University. I'll give you a little overview and show you some work that's being done. And then John's going to talk about his own work with 3D printing of musical instruments and using that for various artistic purposes. So the place, so CCRMA, oh, yep, there we go. But it's pronounced karma, which is kind of fun. I get to go to work and say I'm going to go work for karma. We've been around for a long time, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and where we're at now. But first I'm going to just, that sometimes it's hard to believe that we actually got people to fund us to have an entire center devoted to computers and music. So I just want to talk about some of the things that we examine, and sort of like the three main questions we look at. One is signal processing and digital signal processing. So in that field, we ask, how is it that you make a computer make sound? Computers were around for a while before they were ever convincingly making sound, and now it's become, a given that your laptop, your little mini computer in your pocket can all make sound. And all of that technology was developed by people, and we continue to develop that. So the people that work on that are studying electrical engineering and computer science. We also do work on perception, and so that's how human beings perceive sound. And we work with people who are studying psychology, human biology, medical sciences, statistics, and things like that. And then the third question is, okay, so we know how to make a computer make sound. We know how to how our brains are we sort of know how our brains are perceiving music. What are we going to do with that? I think human beings have always made art with whatever technology is being developed. I think it's a way that we make sense of our evolving technologies, and that's part of what we do. So we look at what kinds of sounds are we going to make with these electronics, and how are we going to interact with them. So there's composers, performers, artists, computer scientists, people working in the field of human-computer interaction, physical interface design, mechanical engineering, and spatialized audio. So the first project I'm going to talk about is a really exciting project. This is the Hagia Sophia church slash mosque slash museum in Turkey. And it was built in 360 AD, and until the mid-15th century, it was an Eastern Orthodox or Roman Catholic church. And then for about 500 years, it was a mosque. And in 1931, it was secularized, and in 1935, it was turned into a museum. What's special about this place is that it essentially had 1,100 years of music written for this environment. So if you look at this picture, that's the inside of Hagia Sophia. This is the layout. And unfortunately, the dimensions aren't showing up. But this is 200 feet by 400 feet. So this is a sonic space the size of a football stadium. The reverberation time when you make a noise to the time that it dies out is something like approaching 10 seconds. And when the music that was written for the weekly liturgy for this space took that into account. So the length of the notes that the people sang, the way that they stacked the different notes to create harmonies, were all based on that specific space. When it was a mosque, the Christian liturgy couldn't be sung, and now that it's a secularized museum, there's no worship and no religious songs allowed to be sung in the space. What ended up happening was that we did get Jonathan Abel, who's one of our researchers, was able to get 2 students to go to this temple and get permission to pop balloons in the space. And that essentially, what we call that is an impulse. And what we get back is an impulse response. And that's like the sonic fingerprint of the space. So I'm going to play for you the sound of the balloon popping, and then I'm going to show you the sort of cleaned up version, which we call the impulse response, which is just the fingerprint. And then I'm going to show you what we were able to do with this, which is pretty darn cool. Okay. And by the way, it took it was a massive endeavor. And they were given 3 balloon pops. That's it. So here's the best balloon pop. Oh wait, let's make that louder. Okay. This is the natural balloon pop. It's not. Okay, that's Leo. Yeah, here we go. So that's why it had to be cleaned up, because there were people harassing them. Right. Okay. So then once that was done, what do you do with that? Well, what they did with it is that Capella Romana is a group that specializes. They're a vocal ensemble that specializes in early Christian singing, and that's their specialty. They're scholars and they're musicians. That's their focus. And they had been singing some of the liturgy from the Hagia Sophia. So what Jonathan Abel and the other researchers did was that they basically were able to mimic the same reverberation pattern and allow the singers to sing in that environment. And the singers themselves were able to discover new things about this music that they'd been singing for decades and that hadn't been heard in 400 years. So here's Capella Romana singing in the Karma stage without any sort of added reverberation.
Oh no.
And that's the kind of work we do. Boy, time goes fast. Okay, so anybody have any questions about that? No. Okay. All right. So how did we get to the place where we were doing work like this? Well, Karma has a pretty cool history, and it informs the way we work right now. In 1957, Max Matthews invented this thing called music, which was, he wasn't necessarily the exact, I think someone else beat him slightly to being the first person to ever make a computer make sound, but he made a computer software language called music when he was working at Bell Labs. And Max was a really great sharing guy, and so he published an article in Science magazine about how to make a computer make sound. And John Channing was a student at Stanford, and he read that, and he was a composer, and he didn't know how to program a computer. So he went back to New Jersey, and Max taught him how to program a computer. And he came back to Stanford and did that, and then started to program computers at the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Lab. And somewhere along the way, he developed FM synthesis, which was responsible for all those keyboards that came out in the 80s. He's responsible for the keytar. So I don't know what to say about that. And slowly we moved from using big mainframe computers to using smaller computers. That's a very short example. But where we are now is that we've got five full-time professors, about 12 lecturers. We have about 250 students a year, 30 full-time grad students. We have broad interdisciplinary connections, and we've got about 5 studios, 3 labs, and 35 courses during the year and 9 summer workshops, which is a big leap from being the weirdos in the artificial intelligence lab. One cool thing about the space is that when CARMA was at the artificial intelligence lab, obviously we weren't bringing in great amounts of defense money. Just a surprise to me, but anyways, yeah. So it was worked out that if CARMA students wanted to use these big mainframe computers, they could do it, but they had to do it in the middle of the night. And so they were definitely sort of like the ugly stepchildren of artificial intelligence. And now what happens at the, I'm sort of the building manager, so I have to monitor who has space. And every person gets 8 hours in the studio a week. So usually I can't kick out an undergraduate. John can't kick out anyone. None of us can, we all have sort of equal access. Nobody's the ugly stepchild that has to work in the middle of the night. We have collaborators in industry. We work with NASA, the medical school, the design school. I'm going to skip Stanford. But you should look up the Stanford. Sorry guys, I'm terrible at PowerPoint. You should look up the Stanford Laptop Orchestra if you like laptops. This last winter, I taught a class where with the same person that did the work on Hagia Sophia, and what we were exploring was how to take the simple principles of resonance and reverberation and create sculptures with them. So this is a piece. I hope the video comes through nicely. By a student named Jeff Rowell, and he took the pickups out of the guitar and mounted them on pendulums. And when the pendulums swing in and out, you get sort of a phase shifting pattern as they do that. You hit this barrel, and there are vibration transducers in these 2 barrels. There's a contact microphone in this barrel, and it goes through some signal processing and goes out to the other 2 barrels.
Rolling. John to talk about his work.
Great, so I'm going to try to go quickly here. It's the end of the night, but my name is John Granzo, and I arrived at this wonderful place Sasha's just presented, and I'm trying to contribute to the environment there. It's intimidating as it is exciting. I'm probably going to do my research in auditory perception, but CCRMA accommodates many kinds of interests, and I'm also an instrument builder, so I'm going to talk about that today. I started building acoustic instruments out of wood, and so this phrase by Mark Strand really touches me because I went through that process with a luthier in Canada named George Rosani, where you continually modify wood, sculpt it, sand, reduce it, tap it, tune it, all with the attempt to try to produce an instrument that will sound good. And so you're involved in every incremental process of the construction, and that's very interesting. You have a memory of what you did, and the next time you might do it differently. This was already a hybrid instrument because we lost the templates for the sides, and so I simply measured the sides from my pre-existing guitar. And so I started to think about how objects, of course, inherit a certain history, especially instruments. And at the Banff Center, this notion was foregrounded with a set of daxophones I built with Canadian artist Dan Fredrickson. These are experimental instruments designed by Hans Reichel, and we built them all from one plank of wood, and every time we cut the plank, we would knock the remaining source wood and take a spectrogram, which ended up being the cutout in the tongue. So it was a feed-forward, very simple algorithm that made it such that each instrument had a trace of its source wood. So already thinking about more automatic or maybe algorithmic designs. I then built one out of aluminum. This is the sound this thing's got. On a mill and a lathe, so already the tool path is starting to be automated. And now, of course, with 3D printing, the question is how can this contribute to instrument design? What can we do with this? How much of the manual stuff I loved in acoustic instrument making do we want to relinquish? And what kind of iterations can we do? Why such an uninteresting picture when there's all this amazing stuff going on in 3D printing? Because I feel like anyone who's shoveled a sidewalk, which maybe not many of you have, and I'm Canadian, so inadvertently invent 3D printing. If someone walks on the walk before you shovel it, that's actually the first layer of a 3D printed foot. But of course, I didn't realize that as a kid, or else I would have invented laser sintering. So this is how printing works. You just need another layer of snow, and then you need the person to walk in the same spot. And slowly, a 3D printed footstep will arise. I don't get to use laser sintering yet, although it's a high resolution option that I hope to try to use. So far, I've just been doing FDM, fusion deposition modeling. These are very simple resonators, clearly inspired by known things, bottles or Helmholtz resonators, little flutes. I then 3D printed the body of the daxophone to make it a stereo version. I explored some molds. This is a silicone mold where you machine the interior structure to thereby control the diameter of the inner cavity. By doing this, I was able to make these silicone cylinders, and they fit together to simulate the vocal tract. So by rearranging them, you can get the different vowel sounds. So you have to have some sort of whistle that simulates the waveform of the vocal folds. So without the vocal tract, the vocal folds might sound like. And if you blow it through something like this, you start to hear some of the. So this would be a great toy for kids who had a predilection for linguistics. This is a project, a pilot project with researchers from the CNR in Pisa, where we 3D printed some Helmholtz resonators from the equations just to see if it would work. All the resonators on top are the same pitch, and on the bottom are the same pitch, and they're about a musical fifth apart. And the predictions basically played out, unsurprisingly. It's a 200-year-old theory. I think one of the interesting applications for 3D printing is in archaeoacoustics. These are Strombus tropical shells that are used for trumpets that are exhumed in the highlands of Peru, and they're very ancient instruments. If you'll entertain a reckless analogy, I like to think of 3D printing as somehow analogous to the advent of ceramics, when suddenly people were being much more playful and experimental with these forms. So eventually they find ceramic versions of the Strombus shell, but even though a lot of them are skeuomorphic, some of them start to stylize the form or experiment with the shape. So I think of 3D printing like that. Also inspired by whistling vessels from Peru. So I like to look back at really ancient instruments and think, can we scan these and 3D print them? Because clearly we can't handle these or play with them too much unless they've been made recently. So I want to present sort of one of the recent works inspired by these whistling vessels. Basically, you put water in these, and the oscillation of water changes the air pressure. And if you can sculpt a sort of whistle on the head, it will play however many tones or whistles you put on. So I discovered with also artist Dan Fredrickson and Chris Chafe, my supervisor, that the motorcycle gas tank has that requisite U shape for the air pump. So I 3D printed whistles to put on the pump on the gas tanks. And here's a video of discovering them in their natural habitat. So I thought. It's not there. Anyway, maybe we'll. Pardon?
That's what also on this.
Oh, there it is. Yes. Sorry. So finally, Yamaha's two interests, music and motorcycles, converge. We call this piece zombie taxa. A zombie taxon is a fossil that, by some natural process, is put in the wrong sedimentary layer, so it confuses people about when it existed. I had to sneak up very carefully. So these are just acoustic whistles 3D printed. You're hearing the mode shift, just like when you overblow a recorder, it jumps up to a higher register. We CNC machined these heads on my friend Devin's machine. They look like topographical maps. There's some metaphor about petroleum and all the sources of energy here. So it's not a very expressive instrument, but you can actually play it. As I demonstrate here, I've gained the bird's trust now. Tremolo. Anyway, we actually get to do this kind of thing. So I'll finish off with a plug for a workshop I'm doing this summer. If anyone's interested in learning a bit of CAD and trying to print up some ocarinas or simple musical instruments, it's taking place at the end of the summer at CCRMA, which you can find on our website. Thank you very much.